Hey, welcome back. We are ready to do project number 3. I am Dave.
I'm Bob.
And we'll start off. We'll let Bob kind of remind us of our theme that we got going on and kind of introduce what we're going to be doing today. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, we've had all of our games so far in some way linked to these sustainability goals. And you saw in our first Build a House and our second Recycling and Trash Collection games that they tied to, as they're numbered on this screen, goals 11 and 12. Well, today we're going on to goal 14, which is Life Below Water. We're going to have an aquatic-themed game today where we're going to try to protect fish from trash. And if you go to YouTube or any sort of search engine to find videos on ocean cleanliness and trash, you can see that this is actually a really, really big problem. There's a massive section of the ocean that just has circulating plastic in it from waste that humans have put into it, and it's a growing problem. And so as much fun as this game will be, this is a serious issue and something to keep in mind when you're thinking about ways to better your world.
Cool. So we always like to start off by kind of introducing the project by showing a solution, right? So it's what we're going for today. And so the goal is that we are a scuba diver, and we're trying to protect these fish from trash. That was a bad start. I lost 2 fish to trash already. And so there's lots and lots of trash in our ocean. And the trash is in the form of jars in my game. So you can decide what you would like for your trash to be. And our scuba diver, you can see he's got this little net. So I'm going to start it up again. I'll let him go ahead and get eaten there. We lost our last one. So the idea is that you're trying to protect all the fish. And right now I have 3 lives, so 3 fish. And I'm also getting points whenever I collect the jars. I lost a fish back there. I'm down to 2 lives. And so the goal is to collect as many jars as you can before you lose your fish. And you can make changes to the game to make it more challenging. I lost that fish. Because it's important that when you make games, you try to make it fun. There I got 16 points. So that's our goal today. And so what I want you to do is I want you to, and then there's a whole host of learning objectives that we're trying to get you to do. Detecting, touching, making loops. Lots with clones in this game. We did clones last time, but we're gonna hit them even heavier this time. So it's time for you to start doing stuff. So go to scratch.mit.edu or whatever Scratch-related tool you use. Click on Create. As always, we start off with a cat. There is no cat in my game, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the cat. So I'm going to say goodbye, Mr. Cat. And the hero of our game, kind of like the main person, for me is a scuba diver. So I'm going to click on this Choose a Sprite. And I'm going to do a search in here for the word diver. Now, if you wanted to pick something different as your hero, you totally could, right? We like to have a theme of underwater and things like that. And so I'm going to pick on Diver 2 here, just because that's the one that I used before. And what I'm going to do that's fun is I can actually draw on this diver, which is going to be neat. So this diver, I want him to collect trash. So you could use any costume you wanted. But what I want to do is on this diver of mine, I want him to have like a net or something. So go ahead and click on costumes. So normally we do the code, but if you click on costumes, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to draw on top of this guy, which is totally legal in Scratch and actually kind of like tons of fun. And so I'm going to go ahead and draw a big black net. So to draw, there's a variety of tools. The one that I actually care about here is the brush tool. So I'm just going to click on brush. You can decide what color you want your net to be. Maybe I'll just make it a black net. I don't know, black's kind of the ugliest color, but it's simple. When you paint, you can see like how big your paintbrush is. Right now mine's 10. That seems fine. And so my goal is I kind of want to make it look like he's holding a big, net, or I guess maybe it's more of a tennis racket than a net. So you can take as long as you need to draw. So you can see that I tried to make a little net there, right? I guess really a net kind of blows behind it. But I think mine in my example was more of a tennis racket. And so draw whatever you would like that you think feels like a net or tennis racket. So there we go. All right, so I just kind of drew some things in there. So he's trying to catch these things in here. I guess if you wanted, you could, kind of draw a sweeping behind type in that too. You get the idea. Make it however you want. Other things
here as we think ahead to the way this game is going to work, you noticed as Dave was playing the example game that anytime the diver net entity touched a jar, the jar disappeared. And so as you're drawing this net, you can think about the advantage that you're giving yourself when you play the game. If you made this net enormous, you would literally have every jar touching you and you would never lose. And if you made this net really small, you would be constrained to or limited to just the height of the diver. And so, Dave picked a size here, and he's going to size the character when he gets in the environment to make it an appropriate game feel. And that's something that designers think about is how is this going to play? Is this going to be too easy, too hard? So just something to think about as you're drawing your net. If you get too ridiculous with it, you are in fact changing the dynamic of the game.
Yeah, and Bob actually said there's something I think is really important. Most people, like if they want it to be smaller, they say, "Oh, I'm going to make my drawing smaller." But really, when you're drawing, don't worry about size, because size is actually best changed over here where it says size 100. I actually think this game is more fun with a smaller diver, right? And so the diver actually has to be smaller. It makes it a little harder, to be honest. And so you can pick whatever size you think would be fun for the diver. There's no right or wrong answer, right? But I like the size map for it. So don't worry about making it smaller when you're drawing it. Make it as big as you want, and then just change the size over here later. Great. So I'm happy enough with my diver that I could actually add some code for him. Before I start adding code for him, though, I would like for him to be swimming in an ocean instead of whiteness. So to set a backdrop, I'm actually just going to click over here that says choose a backdrop. And I'm just going to type in here into the search field ocean to see if there's something that works. And actually, as I was typing it, I saw this water 1, which is exactly what my example game had. And I kind of liked it. So I'm going to put it back up there again. Great. So now what I want to do is I want to have my diver swimming around. Now, normally what I do when I start a game is I pick some spot where he starts at, right? So maybe he'll start from right back here always. And I usually start with when green flag clicked. So I put him where I want him to start, and then I come into events, and I find a when green flag clicked. And then the way most of my games start is I like for my sprites to start at a certain spot. So I go to motion, and I choose to grab this go to XY. And sometimes, if I'm feeling like really OCD, I'll have them point in direction 90 as well. But this is nice because let's say I'm playing a game and I finish over here and my diver is faced in some crazy direction. As soon as I click the flag, my next game always starts the same. In this game, that doesn't really matter. If you started for somewhere weird, it wouldn't be a big deal. But I get in this habit, and I kind of like to do it. The next thing we want to do is we like to think about how this game worked. And what happens is the diver is actually moving, not with any keystrokes, but he's chasing the mouse, right? So just wherever the mouse goes, that's where the diver goes. So our goal is to make code that does that. So we want to do it not just once, but we want to do it forever. So go to Control and drag over a forever. Now this is pretty common to tell sprites to do things forever. It's not so nice with people, but it's fine with computer graphics. And I want him to forever point towards the mouse. So I'm going to go into motion, find point towards the mouse. And you could actually run it right now, and just no matter where the mouse goes, he would point towards it. And then I also want him to move towards it as well. So I'm going to stop it there. And I'm going to have him move. And you can have him move at different speeds. I think I'm going to go with 5. So 5 will slow him down some. It makes him fast, but not too fast. Now, if he catches the mouse, something that's kind of surprising is going to happen. So if you run yours and you let him actually catch the mouse, he kind of freaks out, right? If you like that, you can leave that. That can actually be like a funny feature of your game. That's no big deal. But if you look at the solution, whenever he reaches the mouse, he actually stops, right? So the moment he actually gets there, he stops moving. I'm sorry, I'm not protecting the fish. I'm just trying to show stopping. So our game is different than the solution. Let's see if we can figure out how to make him stop if he catches the mouse. So what I want to do is I want to actually only move, and I only want to point towards the mouse if I'm not already touching the mouse. So you heard me say the word if there. You can tell that we actually want to put these two things don't just need to be in there. There needs to be an if statement that goes in before them. So if statements are over in control. Here's the if statement that I want. And so if some condition is true, then do these two lines of code. So now we've just got to figure out what the condition is. So the condition could be if I'm touching the mouse pointer, then move. That's the opposite of what I want. So I want if I'm not touching the mouse pointer, then do this stuff. So not is the thing that's in operators. Maybe you haven't seen it before, but it's over here. Here's not right here. Notice how it's diamond shaped. It's going to drop right into here, no problem at all. So if I'm not touching the mouse pointer, so touching the mouse pointer is in sensing. And here is touching the mouse pointer. Now you'll notice that there's a down arrow, meaning I could definitely like toggle this to something else. It looks like it's having internet problems. I'll just kind of ignore that. If it's not touching the mouse pointer, then do this. And so now let's try it again. And so now whenever I touch the mouse pointer, you can see stops. And if you liked it the other way, you can leave it the other way. But you can see that this is the way that I think looks a little bit better. Cool. So our diver is in great shape. He's moving around quite nicely. I think it's time to add some more characters in our game. So we could do fish next, or we could do jars next. I think that I'll probably do fish next. So you can see that there's 3 fish in this game. Now, given that there's 3 fish in this game, you would probably assume that if you went and looked at the code, if you like looked inside, that you would see 1 diver and 3 fish, but there's actually only 1 fish. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to use clones very effectively. So there's actually only 1. Oops, I don't mean to show you the solution, right? I really want that to go away. You're so annoying. I'll ignore it. All right, so I had some problems there with mine not saving. I think I'm motivated to actually give it a name instead of untitled whatever. I'm going to call mine Save the Fish. All right, now let's go add a fish. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Choose a Sprite. And again, I recommend fish because fish is like, I don't know what we're trying to do in this. And fish is also nice because there's actually a couple different costumes. But if you wanted to use something different, you totally could, right? So it's no big deal. So I'm going to use a fish. Fish is kind of big right there. Maybe I'll make my fish quite a bit smaller, and maybe 50 or so. All right, so what my fish is going to do is, first off, there's only 1 fish right now, but I want to actually make 3 fish. And the way you do this is through the magic of clones. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into events, and I'm going to add a when green flag clicked. But then I'm also, and I'm going to do some stuff here, I'm also going to go into control and scroll to the bottom of control, and you'll find this when I start as a clone. And so here's the funny thing. There's a fish right here that actually is my 1 true fish. And all I'm going to do with him is I'm actually going to hide him. So I'm going to go and just say hide. And then I'm going to make 3 clones of him. So to make 3 of something, you could go into control, repeat 10, change the repeat 10 to a 3, because we only want 3 clones of him. And then inside of this repeat 3, go to the cloning area and say create clone of myself. So this is a neat trick to go from 1 of something to 3 of them, right? Now, you have to be careful when you do a trick like this because you want the 3 to be different. And so we're going to actually do some things to make random choices. the first random choice we're going to make is we're going to make where they start at random, but always somewhere on the left-hand side of the screen. So the first thing I want to do is I want to, when I start as a clone, I want to go to this go-to command and pop it on here. Now I'm actually going to go somewhere before I even show, but it's definitely important. If you are cloning something that's hidden, it will also be hidden. And so you're going to go somewhere, which is going to be random, which is not done yet. And then you're going to show shortly after that. So now we've got to decide, how do we make these things random? Well, there's a command in the green area called pick random. So I'm going to pick some random X, and I'm going to pick some random Y. Now the challenge is, what range do you want for the X, and what range do you want for the Y? Really quick, you don't have to do this, but I'm just going to remind you of the grid. I open this grid up all the time. If I want the fish to start anywhere from the top to the bottom in the Y, that would actually be negative 180 up to positive 180. And if I want them to start somewhere on the left-hand side of the screen, I probably want them to start somewhere from like negative 240, which is, you can barely see it right there, but that's the far left, up to maybe, I don't know, maybe negative 100, but I don't know, just somewhere on the left-hand side. And the fun thing about this is, with just this much code, if I hit the green flag, you can see that my original fish is hidden, and so he's gone, and then these 3 clones show up instead. And so every time I run it, they show up somewhere differently. And it's important.
I have 2 questions,
Yep.
and I'm pretty sure I can answer both of them, but I'm gonna let you answer if I answer incorrectly. One question you might be having is, why do we not have to hide these clones? Well, the fish that was being cloned was hidden, and so I believe the way the system's working is, when you clone it, it's cloning it exactly the way it was at the time that it was cloned. Dave's nodding, so that's why there. The other thing is actually a little more subtle. Why hide the original and create these 3 copies? Why not use the original? Well, one of the reasons that, and Dave can confirm this, is we don't want to copy the same code twice. We don't want to do the same thing over here and over here. So the trick is, you know what, I'm just going to hide this original one, and then I can put all the fun stuff that we're putting into this clone in one spot, and I don't have to do it twice. Are there any other reasons why one might not want to hide that first one?
Yeah, no, you've absolutely nailed it, Bob, and we see exactly why it's so handy to have you stop me on things. But yeah, it's mainly because the clones are going to have code. Like, there's going to be a lot of code here, and we could, if we wanted, put that same code on the original. But it's actually almost always easier to just hide the original, who's kind of the one weird one, and then that way you can have as many clones as you want. And I mean, I'm not telling you how to play your game, but the fun thing about coding here is that I could do 30, and then all of a sudden I can do the same game with 30 fish, right? So I got to protect 30 fish now. And if you have like 30 that are all the same and one that's weird, well, why not just hide the weird one? Because if you wanted one more, just make one more clone, right? And it just works out to be easier to do this way. So, cool.
And this is a concept that actually runs forward in programming. As long as you're a programmer, you'll be dealing with things like this, where anytime you have a section of code, and then you have this thought of, well, I'll just copy this code and put it over here, now you're putting yourself in a position where if you ever want to change something in that code, you have to remember to go change it in 2 spots. Yeah. Programmers, as smart as they can be and as clever as they can be, often have a lot of things on their mind, and remembering details like that, especially if they're changing something well after they wrote it, that's not a memory that can necessarily be trusted. So trying to consolidate all of the interesting code into one spot is a much safer way to do it as a programmer.
I'm going to go ahead and switch my backdrop back. You were probably just watching, so you don't have to do this, but I'm just going to click on the backdrop, and then backdrops, and then go back to my water. All right, so now I'm back to my fish again. The other thing I want to do with my fish is, you can see there's actually 4 different costumes here. but my clones are all just the little Nemo fish here. So actually, I would like to make them potentially be different. So I'm going to go into looks. I'm going to find switch to costume, and I'm going to put it before the show. You can do it after, and I'm going to randomly pick a costume. Now we did this last time too, but the costumes are numbered, right? So this is number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so I can actually pick a random costume by using the same old pick random number. And my fish has 4 costumes, so I'm going to pick a random number from 1 to 4. Oh, that stupid thing's back. I will just ignore it last time because it's annoying. All right, so that time I got 2 yellow blackfish and 1 big yellow. Run it again. That's like a perfect combination, right? It's 1 Nemo, 1 yellow, 1 blue. Cool.
So one thing that the folks that are playing the game or designing this game might think about is I don't know how visible that blue fish is going to be on that water. If they decided that they wanted to only use 3 of these costumes, if they deleted that costume,
yep.
I'm assuming they renumber and they would just pick a random number 1 to 3, correct?
Correct. So if you didn't like the blue, I love the blue, so I'm not going to trash
don't
it.
Get rid of it.
And by the way, you could also like you can make your own fish too, right? Like there's just no limit. So let's say I really wanted a red fish, right? And so you can do all these crazy things. So there you go. Now I've got a beautiful red fish. Maybe we'll give him a red face. Oh no, that was bad. Undo button, very useful when you're drawing as well. But now I've got 5 fish because I chose to make a red one. And I'm going to switch this to 5, and now maybe I'll get a red fish. Oh, I got 2 red fish right off the go. So play with your games, right? Make your games unique to you, and it's fun. You could also put a name on there. I could call that my bobfish, right? So, all right, moving on. I want my fish, if we remember the solution, I want my fish to move, so to go like up and down, and to like be wandering around some. So that's my next goal. So right now they're just sitting right there. They're not very fish-like. So I want them to start moving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell them to do something forever. So I'm going to go to control, forever. And what I want them to do is I want them to move. So I'm just going to go to motion. And I'm going to say move. My diver, his speed was 5. My fish should probably be a little slower. Just so that I can actually protect them, right? If they're faster than me, I can't protect them, so they got to be a little slower than me. I'll go with 3. If you run it right now, they are all going straight forwards, and then it's not quite what we wanted. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of things. One, we're going to actually angle them, and so we're going to actually, instead of making them all go forwards, we're going to make them kind of go like up and down. Now, the first thing that you'll probably do, which is fine, is find this point in direction 90. So we could actually do this very first. It's fine to do. And so right now they're pointing to the right. But we could make them go up and down this way. And so now they're all going straight up to the sky. Now, you'll notice that in the actual game, when they hit the edge, they would bounce, right? And they would also not change directions like they are now. There's all kinds of little things. So we're making progress. They're not going forwards, but now they're also not bouncing. Bouncing is easy. It's a blue command. I got to find it here. You scroll down some. If on edge, bounce. Run it. Now what's happening now is the fish are all going around. One of them is kind of going at a funny angle, which kind of surprises me. I expected them all to be going up and down. But you can also see that they're pointing in the direction that they're moving. This is a designer's choice. I just want to show you what your options are. One choice you can do is you can just leave it like this to where they're going up and down. If you observe this game, though, they're all always pointing to the right. I don't know which way you prefer, but I just want you to know about the options. And so the diver, he can have like point in any direction or stay in one direction, and so can the fish. So let me go ahead and do this to the fish, and then you'll see it. So I'm clicking on the fish. I'm clicking on the direction. You can make fish to where they do not rotate. So it's the do not rotate thing. So if I run it again now, they always point to the right, which is kind of neat. So if you like that no rotation, you can do that. Also in our game, we don't make them go straight up and down. We actually kind of like make them slowly wandering forwards. This makes them harder to protect. They're very brave fish, and they're going to be much harder to protect. Cool. So I think that is good enough for me. They're bouncing around. They're going to be a little harder to protect. And I think we're probably ready for some trash. You want to put some trash on the screen, Bob?
Yes.
All right. So let's go find some trash. So in my example, the trash that I picked was a jar. But this one, you can pick whatever trash looks good to you. So there's my jar. Do you want to go with the jar again, Bob, or do you want to do some other sort of trash in the ocean?
Let's make it look like the solution, but totally invite others in the audience to pick whatever they want.
Sounds good.
You can override me if you'd rather find some.
Oh, no, I didn't have a strong preference. Now your question's not over. Yeah, so I guess to make it look like the solution, we use the red jar in the solution. So in our world, there's a tanker that's gone down, and it was carrying not oil, but lots and lots of red jelly. And so our red jelly is going to actually, if you think about the solution here, there's going to be a lot of jelly, right? So it's going to use that same cloning trick, right? It's going to be a little different, but it's going to be a lot of clones again. So our code here is going to start with that same structure we had before. So like when the green flag is clicked, hide the original, because there's no reason to actually do anything with the original. And then when I start as clone, this is over in the control area. When I start as clone, I'm going to go to some random position, and then I'm going to show after that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on go to some position. I think the positions is they all start over here, like over on this side. So an X around 240. And then the Y is random, right? So we're going to need our buddy in green, pick random. And I went kind of fast through that, but pause the video if you ever need, right? That's the beauty of it being a video. And I'm going to make them go from negative, maybe 160 is plenty, up to positive 160. So they won't necessarily go all the way to the bottom. They'll just get pretty close there, right? So there's negative 160. That's pretty much at the bottom. And then there's positive 160 pretty much at the top. Then what I want to do is I'm going to want to show them. So I'll click on show. Now I just want you to use your thinker for a little bit. If I run this right now, what would happen? And then we'll ask Bob. Bob, what would happen if I ran this right now?
You know, one of the things while people are thinking, they can always go back and look at code that we just wrote. If you look at our fish, after we hid the original fish, we wrote some code of what to do when I start as a clone. But in this version, obviously, we see we haven't actually made any clones yet. So I'm guessing very little will happen.
Yeah,
this will look like very little will happen because we're going to start this. The original jar is going to hide. We'll have created a new one. Maybe if we ever start a clone, we'll know what to do. But we haven't created one.
Yeah, so we got to make clones. That's exactly right.
Make clones, yeah.
Now with the fish, we knew we wanted 3 of them. But if we think about what's happening with the jars here, is there's actually an infinite number, right? It's just a new one is made like it looks like all the time, right? So a new one is made like maybe every I don't know, half second or something. I forget what it is in the solution, but let's say half second. So what we want to do is on the jar, when we make these clones, we actually want to do them forever. And we'd like to have a little pause in here. Maybe, and you can decide what you think is good. Maybe I was thinking a half second, 0.5 seconds. And then the cloning stuff is always at the bottom of the control. Create clone of myself. And so now if we do this, we can see that every half second, it makes another jar clone, which is cool. They are not really very intimidating yet because they just sit over on the right side. And so we're going to have to make them move, right? And so we're making clones, which is great. Now what we can do is we can make the clones do stuff. So I think what I want them to do is I want them to forever. And I want them to move across the screen this way. Now, whenever you move something, you can use the move command, but move cares about what direction it's pointing. So whenever I know I want them to move to the left, sometimes I just use change X by. So as a reminder, X is kind of the left and right, and then Y is the up and down. So I'm going to change this 10 to a -5. So now if I run it, my jars will be much more intimidating. So they are cruising across. Now the speed at which things go is totally up to you. It kind of seems like they're coming in kind of fast, right? But you know what? We'll give it a shot. If you ever decide that they're too fast, just slow them down, right? But they're coming in like bullets right now. They're kind of.
Anyone is curious? I put mine at -3.
-3. All right, fine. They're coming too fast. -3 it is. All right. Next thing you probably noticed is the jars don't hit anything. They just kind of come cruising on through quite nicely. So we're going to have to make the jars hit fish, the jars hitting the diver, and then also you notice that we're kind of piling up jars here on the side. We also want jars hitting the left edge. So jars have to hit all kinds of things. Now, whenever you're doing a hit, like a touching something, usually you put the code on one or the other. So with the jar and the diver, who knows? We might put it on the jar, we might put it on the diver. I always have to think about it. Jars hitting fish.
What means by that is we can be on the jar side and say the diver hit us, or we can be on the diver side and say the jar hit us.
Correct.
So that's kind of what he means by either side.
Yeah. But with the left edge of the jar hitting the left edge, that pretty much has to be on the jar. So let's start with that one. So essentially what we want is if the jar gets far enough over here and it hits the edge, we just want it to go away, right? So we're going to want an if statement. And we're going to say if some condition. Now the condition we want is if the jar, I'm just going to make it visible here. If he gets to, it looks like mine got as far as -243. So he actually went a little off screen. But maybe if he gets like -235, we'll just make him go away, right? So I'm going to go into operators. And I'm going to go and I'm going to choose to grab a less than. This is interesting, but if you can make less than work, you could also make greater than work. It's just a matter of which side you put things on. But what I care about is I care about my X being less than -235, because this always gets me, right? But like as I'm getting more and more negative, like there I'm -200, -212. If I get to -230, maybe 230 is enough. But like if I get more negative than 235, so if I get less than -235, and I want the jars X, so I go to motion, I grab his X position. So if the jars X gets less than, like more negative than -235, then what I want to do is I want to delete this clone. Delete this clone. We also consider that like scoring a point. And so I'm going to go ahead and run it and make sure it works. And then I'm going to start giving myself points. Because, oh no, we don't get points for that. We get points for when we collect them. That's right. You have to collect them to get a point.
One quick question while you're at a pause. I was kind of thinking ahead and trying to write code in the way that I thought you were going to do it. And I put a hide when the X position got less than -235. Could you maybe describe for me the difference between hide and delete the clone?
Yep. So hide works fine as far as the users is concerned. They don't know a difference between hide or delete this clone, but the computer does know a difference because the computer has to keep track of things that are hidden, right? So it's fully responsible. And so if you think about how many jars this thing is after you play for a while, it's eventually got more and more jars. And so as a favor to the computer, you just delete it, and then the computer doesn't have to manage it anymore. It's just gone. So whenever you're dealing with clones, if you know you're done with them, just delete them, and your computer will thank you. Great question.
And behind the scenes, and I actually was pretty sure that's what was happening there. But what Dave's talking about when you get into more advanced coding, your computer only has so much memory. Everything that the computer is storing is inside its memory, and as a program is storing more and more things in memory, as Dave said, a favor to the computer. Your computer can actually slow down. You might have noticed this when you're using the computer or doing other things on the internet.
And the creators of Scratch actually limit the number of clones you can have as well. And I forget what it is, but maybe it's like 200 or so. But with this game, since I'm deleting them, there's no way there's going to be 200 on the screen at a time. But if I was hiding them, they would cap me at like 200 clones. And then my game would just stop making jars for some unknown reason, right? All right, so they're deleted when they get to the edge, and it looks pretty natural. The next thing I've got to do is, I've got to do touching the diver. I've got to do touching the fish. I think that I'll do touching the diver next. And I think what I'll do is I'll write code on the jar that looks to see if he's touching the diver. And again, I could have done this a couple of different ways, but I'm right here on the jar, so I think I'll put another if statement in, and I'll just say if. And if I'm touching the diver, so that's in sensing. So if I'm touching the diver, and again, I do these things pretty quick, but in Scratch, you can pause the video as you need. So if I'm touching the diver, obviously I'm going to want to delete the clone as well. So deleting clone is in control. Delete this clone. But actually, I want to score a point because the diver did his job, right? And so this is like how you keep track of the score. Scores are variables, so I'm going to need to go into the variables area here. And you can see that they make one variable for you with the name myVariable, not a very good name. I'm going to click on Make a Variable. Now this variable that you make, you can call it whatever you want. You could call it score. That would be a fine thing because that's what it is. I think in the solution I called mine jars. So it's number of jars I collected. In general, I just do for all sprites. It just works out better, especially if I'm displaying it on the screen, which I am here. And I have never once needed a cloud variable. So for all sprites, jars. So this is my score, my number of jars that I've successfully caught. Suppose if I wanted to be verbose, I could have said jars successfully caught. Whenever you make a variable, you've kind of got three jobs. You've got to create it, check. You also want to, this is one people forget a lot, you want to set its initial value. So somewhere you should set it to 0. I think what I'm going to do, just because I'm looking at the jars code, I'm going to set its initial value right here. Whenever I hit the green flag, I'm going to set jars to 0. That code is nice because that just runs one time up there, and it's right at the start of the program. I could have just as easily put that on the diver or the fish. It wouldn't have mattered, but it makes sense to be on the jars, right? And then when I touch the diver, I want to delete the clone, and I also want to change jars by 1. And then this is completely optional, but if you wanted to make a sound when you collect a jar, you could do that. What do you think, Bob? Should we add a sound or no sound?
You can add a sound.
All right. So sounds, I'm always torn on sounds because sounds like they're fun, but then they kind of get distracting as well. Just to remind or to teach how sounds work, each sprite can only play certain sounds. So like right now, my diver can play pop, my fish can play bubbles or ocean wave, and my jar can play pop. So it turns out the diver and the jar both do this. You can add more sounds, but right now if I hit play, that's the sound that a jar makes. I'm actually fine with that sound, but I want to show you how you can play a different sound. And so for each sprite, you could actually choose a sound. There's a bunch built in, and so you can play these different sounds. But like coin is sometimes a good one for when you're like gaining points.
It's very hard to hear. I don't know if I heard the pop when you did it, and I can barely hear coin. I don't know.
Okay, so that actually is kind of good in a way. So I'll crank up my computer's volume to see if you hear it or not. Here you go. I'll try it one more time. So I can hear it now. Can you hear it at all? All right. The screen recording software is too smart and it canceled it out. you'll hear yours, right? So I'm just going to show you what to do. And I'm going to go ahead and say play sound coin. And then here we do have a little problem because actually I didn't think this over, Bob. Because if I play sound coin and then delete it one microsecond later, you may not hear the sound. Okay, it actually worked. I was afraid that you wouldn't even hear it.
I'm hearing a little bit.
It's like I'm seeing a ghost or something because I can hear it loud and clear. So the fish is going to be the one that actually looks for if he hit a jar. So I'm going to go into control, and I'm going to grab an if statement. And in here, I'm going to say sensing. And I'm going to grab touching mouse pointer. Now, of course, I don't want mouse pointer, but whenever you see this down arrow, you know there's going to be other options. And I'm going to say if I'm touching a jar. So if I'm touching a jar, what our solution did is it said something briefly, and you could add that if you wanted as well. So he said, I don't know what he said, got me, or I'm drowning in trash for 1 second or so. It was fairly short. And then what he would do is he would disappear. And so he would delete a clone there as well. So delete this clone. Cool. And so now, 3 blues. And so now if you hit a fish, I'm trying to get one of these jars to hit a fish, it says got me, and then they disappear. And so you can see that actually worked pretty well. Now, the thing that didn't work is actually the last thing we're going to have to add. The game didn't end, right? So the game we just keep right on playing, right? We're collecting jars, we're incrementing our score. That's not what we want. So when you lose your 3 fish, then the game is over, right? So in the same way that we have jars, we're going to have like a health meter for like fish left or health or lives or whatever you want to call it. So I need another variable. So I'm going to go into variables. I'm going to make a new variable. You could call it lives. You could call it fish. You could call it fish remaining, whatever you want to do. I think in my solution I called it lives, like how many lives were left. But I call it lives like that. Surely it's with a V, right? Lives. And so my number of lives is actually equal to this number here. So what I'm going to do is I'm in the fish code, which is as good a spot as any to do this. I'm going to set fish to be 3 right here.
Now remember Dave's 3 things we do. We create it,
yep.
Now we initialize it or give it an initial value.
And then we read it somewhere else. Now, one thing that does occasionally get you in trouble is when you finish a game, lives is at 0, right? And then when you start the next game, well, it's a race condition of like, what code is going to run first? And if the code that checks whether lives is 0 runs before setting it to 3, you get yourselves in trouble. So I just wanted to mention that some things that happen in games is you get race conditions when they restart. So you might want to be careful about how you go about setting the lives back equal to 3. So the first thing that occurred to me is to put it right here, which I probably could do. But I happen to know that I'm going to be checking for when it's 0 in the diver's code. And sometimes you're better off, so actually I will put in the diver's code. Sometimes you're better off setting it to 0 in the same sprite where you're checking it. Sorry, setting it to 3 in the same sprite where you're going to check to see if it's 0. And then you don't have to worry about race conditions. Does that make sense, Bob? Did I say that good enough?
Yeah, and I think once you place this inside the diver, we'll see exactly what you're talking about.
So I'm going to set him to 3. So I'm going to set it to 3. So when we hit the green flag, I set jars to 3. Let's go with lives. All right, there we go. So I'm on the diver. I set him to 3. So as soon as I hit this green flag, he's set to 3. And then the game is going to be over when it gets to 0. Now, right now, the fish aren't decrementing it yet, so I've got to go do that first yet. But they get hit, they go away, but I don't actually lose a life yet. So I'm going to go into the fish first, and right here, like right when they say got me, I'm going to change. It says change jars. I'm going to put this in here. Now I can put it above or below. You can do either one you want. It doesn't really matter. I think I'm going to do above. And I'm going to switch it to lives. Change lives by -1, right? And so now, every time I lose a fish, I effectively lose a life. So that's quick. So I lost all my fish. I lost all my lives. Now I'm going to go back to the diver. So I chose to have the diver to be the one that checked for game over. The reason I chose to put him checking for game over is that the fish are clones and they're kind of all disappeared, right? But the diver is the only one that's not a clone. And so there's no chance of him going away. So I'm going to put my if statement, and this is going to be my last line of code, control, if, I'm going to plop it right on here at the bottom. And what I want to know is if my lives is 0. So operators equals. This one right here is an equals. So if this blank is equal to 0, and that blank is going to get filled with a variable for lives. If lives equals 0, then the game is over, right? So I'm going to just say game over. But really, it's just about how many jars they got, right? So I could say game over, that'd be fine. Or I could say you got some number of jars. I didn't plan this, but we're actually doing pretty good on time. How do you put the word jars into the middle? It's a little clunky, but there's an operator called join, which is kind of neat, right? So we could say you got, and I'm going to put a space, and then the next thing I want is a variable. So I'm going to put jars in there. So you got 3, you got 5, you got 15. Here's why I say it's a little clunky. If you want to put something after it, you can actually put another thing here. And so you can start it with a space. You got 15 jars. That's good enough. And then I can join this first thing where it says apple. So I take this and put it into apple. Now it says you got a number, like 15 jars. Does that make sense? And then we'll put a stop all after that. And I think we got ourselves a game. So I'm going to collect a couple jars here. So you can see that I'm doing pretty good. And then I'm going to let some of my fish go, just to kind of show you how that works. So there goes some of my fish. And then I lost the last fish. And it says you got 12 jars. It said it way too fast, though. I'm going to say it for like 6 seconds. Great. So I'm going to collect the jar or two. And now I'm going to let some of my fish go. Now, you might learn, if you play your game long enough, that there's a strategy that's like invincible. And that's to like keep one fish safe, right? And then, so there I got 12 jars.
Well,
If you, my son's home. If you find that your game is too easy, and you want to make it much, much, much harder, make it to where they have to keep all 3 fish, or maybe just to where they have to keep, if I change the 0 to a 1, then you have to keep at least, you can lose 1 fish at most, right? Also, if you wanted to make the game harder, you could start with 30 fish, right? And so it's totally up to you. So the default way is to wait till lives to get to 0. That's the default way to do it. But if you wanted to change your game, you could always change this 3 to some other number to have like 30 fish. And you can change how many of them you have to keep safe as well. So sound good? Sound fun? All right, we've had a ton of fun. I love making these games with you guys. Hopefully you've learned about protecting fish in the ocean, and hopefully you also learned about making clones, collect or figuring out how to do touches, and you've learned to keep trash out of our ocean. Is one of the most important things. Anything you want to say at the end, Bob?
No, thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Happy coding, and we'll see you in the next video.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.